For years, David Barkin worked as a boiler mechanic before leaving his job and pursuing nature photography. He has been documenting the birds and wildlife in Brooklyn's Plum Marsh, part of Jamaica Bay's wildlife refuge, for over 20 years. He has taken over 40,000 photographs and has documented over 500 different species of birds in Brooklyn. It's quite possible that no one knows Brooklyn's wildlife quite like David does. I had the pleasure of meeting him in his apartment in the East Village. So you grew up around Jamaica Bay?
No, I was born in Brooklyn, and I came to Manhattan when I was 18. And my father would take us fishing to Plum Beach every now and then. Well, when I was working as a boiler mechanic, I used to take my dog to work with me. And if lunch was, if I decided to take lunch and I was near Plum Marsh, I would stop and eat my lunch there and take the dog for a walk. And I was walking through the dunes of Plum Marsh and said, wait a minute, I've been here before. And it all came back. But since I was taking these walks with the dog, I suddenly discovered all these wild animals, whether hundreds and hundreds of different species of bird, and animals like possums, raccoons, muskrats, turtles. And when I quit my job as a boiler mechanic, I decided to get into wildlife photography, since I'd always been into photography to some extent. So I invested about $7,000 in equipment and started to take pictures. And to my surprise, I became very good at it. Now, this is a series I did on a bird called the little blue heron. And the light for this series was marvelous. It was about 20 minutes after dawn. And this bird acted like it was posing for me.
Wow.
You have to keep in mind, this is all shot in Brooklyn. I've identified over 500 different species of bird, which is really off the wall. That is so bizarre. That is, in and of itself, it's bizarre. And the reason is that Plum Marsh is on the migrating flyway. So that even though many of these birds don't live in Plum Marsh, this one does. Various different birds will pass through. I have pictures of something called an avocet. That's a Midwest bird. So the leader of the flock was a bird named Louis, and he got completely drunk and took a left turn in Chicago when he was migrating. And the whole flock arrived at Plum Marsh looking very, very confused. And this guy is a very good fisherman. I wrote an article about these birds, which was peer-reviewed in a Dutch magazine, because they make bait. They will pick a flower, shape it into the form of a fish, and then drop it in the water and wait for a large fish to come up, and then they'll snatch that. Wow. And the reason my paper was unique was because nobody had ever seen a little blue heron do that.
How did you come to see that it made the bait? How did you find that out?
That's strictly by chance. I saw him dropping something in the water and took photographs, and when I blew the photographs up, I could see that what he was dropping looked like a fish. And with almost all birds, the male is much more attractive than the female. What's interesting is in the 17th and 18th century, the noblemen would dress up like prigs, and the women, were much more demure. And they'd say, well, look at birds. The guys are always dressed up.
How do you organize all your photos?
Well, I organize it by month and year.
Okay.
All right, that's well, that's a little blue heron flying in a not a great picture. Ah, okay. This is interesting. This is a little blue heron, but it's a baby, and when they're a baby, they're white. So a lot of people mistake them for snowy eagles.
Oh.
But the beak gives them away. And this guy was very cute because he found an old boot and he thought it might be edible. He wasn't sure.
Do you remember taking every photograph?
When I see the photograph, yes.
Yeah, when you see it.
See,
Wow.
I photographed 8 different kinds of hawks at Plum Marsh, and people know about the red-tailed hawk, and this is a red-tailed hawk. And this picture is based on the fact that he saw me and wasn't sure what I was, and he flew at me just to see it. But it turned out to be a decent picture.
Are there other people around when you're taking photos?
I only go on a weekday, and the only people around I almost never run into anyone. The place was a rendezvous for gay guys who wanted to get banged, literally. I mean, really rough sex. Until one of them got murdered, and then they stopped going. I have some pictures of 2 of those guys who look kind of unusual. Ospreys always show up at Plum Marsh, and they nest at Kennedy Airport. I've never seen a bald eagle at Plum Marsh. I have seen some vultures. See, this guy is now diving for fish. Let's see.
And do they stay? How long does each flock kind of stick around?
Well, this is a black-crowned night heron, and if you go to Plum Marsh anywhere from late May to September, you're going to see one of them.
Okay.
I've seen as many as 15 at a time, and unusually enough, even though they'll eat anything, they'll kill anything, they come for the worms. And the marine worms in Plum Marsh can be 20 feet long and this thick, so that's a good meal. The largest I've ever seen was about 10 feet long. And
Worm?
A worm, yeah. And they have these creepy, they look more like millipedes than they do worms. They got these little tiny legs. They look dangerous. They're not, of course, but and the birds love them. I mean, it's pure meat. I mean, there's no bone.
Wow.
And the black-crowned night heron is a regular visitor. There used to be in the fall, the monarch butterflies used to migrate through Plum Marsh, but their numbers have dropped like a stone.
That's nice. Do you ever submit your photographs to magazines?
I've displayed them in galleries, but no, I haven't sent it. This is the marsh hawk, and the marsh hawk is a very unusual hawk. It flies right through the top of the grass, It doesn't, it's not like a high flying bird who looks down and then they fly right through the top of the grass, and it's an incredibly unusual way of hunting for them.
What galleries have you displayed them at, or how many have you had your own show?
No,
Own shows?
no.
So what kind of galleries can you recall?
Anything I could. I've only been in one or two.
Seems to me you could be in a lot more.
I should have some ambition. This particular hawk is a bird that I'm fascinated with. Here he is flying through the grass. You can actually see that he's flying through the top of the grass.
Yeah.
I mean, the grass is 6 feet high, so this is something called a merlin, and it's a falcon. And it is in it's a very sensitive bird and claims to be the smallest bird of prey in America, but the sparrowhawk claims that as well, so they have to argue over that.
So is this what you've been doing full time since you left your job?
Well, I was doing it full time. I'm not doing anything now.
Okay.
My car died. My car betrayed me.
Oh no.
He's coming in for a kill, which was hidden in the grass, so I can't.
So elegant.
Yeah, they're awesome to watch. The shore is filled with sandpipers, and these range in size from this bird called the least sandpiper, who's 6 inches long, to birds that are fairly large, 20 inches high. Now, there are so many different kinds of birds there. This is a flycatcher called the kingbird. And I don't know why they call it the kingbird, but he's about 7, 8 inches long, and he's a cute little guy. And he snatches flies out of the air, does it for a living.
Wow.
So he's got one. And I tried to steal it from him, but you know how it is. When it comes to food, you don't want to share. Now, there are two kinds of orioles which can be found. I have this labeled Baltimore oriole. It's not. It's something called an orchard oriole. And I had never seen an orchard oriole, so I simply labeled it Baltimore oriole. Plum Marsh has at the western end is a forest, and as you move east, you get into sand dunes and a tidal lake, a marine pond, which when it's full is like 2-3 feet deep, and when it's empty, there's just nothing there. And what attracts the herons, well, the black-crowned herons mostly go for the worms, but the blue heron, the great white egret, the snowy egret, the little blue heron, the tricolored heron, they're attracted by the fish, because when that tide comes in, it brings with it gobs of different kinds of fish. Now, this is a baby black-crowned night heron. And it's an interesting aspect. There's the closest relative to the black-crowned night heron is the yellow-crowned night heron. And the adults don't look at all alike. They look completely different. And I'll show you. I mean, and the yellow-crowned night heron shows up pretty regularly at Plum Marsh, but not as common as the black-crowned. But you can't tell the kids apart. They, despite the fact that the yellow-crowned, let's see if I can show you.
But they can.
Yes, I'm sure they can. I can too. There is a way to tell them apart. Let's see. And the beak is all black, whereas with the juvenile black-crowned night heron, the bottom of the beak is yellowish. So that's really the only way I could really tell them apart. Now, the black-crowned adult has red eyes, but their kids have these orange eyes. This is a juvenile yellow crown, not a black crown. I once saw a black-crowned night heron. He was hunting worms, and the worm was wrapped. The worm must have been about 10, 12 feet long. It was wrapped around him like a snake, and it looked like the worm was eating the heron. But I mean, that just was, I mean, I could fool people, but that's not what was going on. Now, this is one of the larger shorebirds, sandpipers. This is something called the greater yellowlegs, and he's about 15 inches high. And they're also very, very common at Plum Marsh. And their closest relative is something called a willet, an eastern willet. And they look very similar. The willet is a tougher bird. The willet is a very tough, very bad-tempered bird. And they did a lot of spitting at me.
You mean like actual spitting?
Yeah.
Like how humans spit?
No. I mean, they were so worked up that stuff was flying out of their... Now, this guy, I took this picture. He was circling me because he really wanted to drive me away. He said, you're planning to eat my kids. Well, I'm going to fix your wagon, buddy. The most common warbler is something called the yellow-rumped warbler. And this is the young lady, yellow-rumped warbler. She's quite pretty, but the male is spectacular. He's blue and gray. He's really a fine-looking bird. Here's another warbler. This one is called the yellowthroat, common yellowthroat. This is the actual point where he actually saw me.
Wow.
So
right
he was like saying, "The fuck? Holy shit, it's a human." I told him, "Look, you're too small to eat. Relax." This is the female common yellowthroat. So she has a yellow throat, but that's it. She doesn't have any of the fancy stuff.
Yeah.
And there are probably 30 or 40 different kinds of ducks that winter there. So this is the male. And that green band that you see, that changes color according to the light. So it looks green in this picture. And this is a pair. Now these ducks don't mate for life. They're seasonal. So the girls put the guys through a real test to see if they're worth banging. I mean, there are a lot of these birds, much more than you would think, who mate for life. I mean, that's it. They get married and that's it. Or there's a duck called the mallard, which is a very common duck. And they're promiscuous duck. They fuck around all the time. But some of them mate for life. My favorite duck is something called the bufflehead. Let's see. And they're very common at Plum Marsh. They're the smallest duck of North America. They're only about 14 inches long. Let's see if I can show you a good picture of them. They're very cute. Yeah, this is a female. This is the male, and they also don't mate for life, and they have a cute little mating dance that they do in the water. The girl sits there and watches, and the male twirls around, and he says, "Look, honey, I'm available." But the girls are picky. What are you gonna do? And I think he's a cutie pie. There are two unusual birds that you can see at Plum Marsh. The black skimmer. Now, if you notice, you can see that the lower beak is longer than the upper.
Yeah.
Well, they have a unique method. These are kids. They have a unique method of fishing, and they're hunting birds, and they hunt for fish. Let's see if I can show you. These are kids. This was actually from a weird incident where the flock landed at Plum Marsh, and they don't nest at Plum Marsh. They nest at the Rockaways, which is about 1.5 miles away. But they fish in the oceans around Plum Marsh. So they landed with all the whole flock landed, including the kids, and then they all flew away, but left 3 kids because the kids were sleeping and didn't notice. So when the kids woke, I stayed away. But when the kids woke up, they were frightened and were calling. And then about 6 or 7 adults showed up and led them back home. It was so cute. See, here's the kid calling, "Mommy!" Okay, can you see what he's doing?
He's like making a trap.
His lower beak is actually in the water.
Yeah.
And he's swimming along. Now they have, if that lower beak should hit a piece of mud, he would break his neck. But he's got an adaptation in his neck that allows his head to snap all the way around and thus release himself from that trap. So this is the way they hunt. They glide through the water, and they have unusually long wings for their size, and they can glide for 100 feet just off the water with the lower beak in the water, and if they contact a fish, they snap it shut. But let's see if I have, this is where you can see his beak caught in the mud, and if without that adaptation, he'd snap his neck. Can you see it?
Yeah.
You see his lower?
Yeah, it's way deep in the water.
They can keep that up without beating their wings. They can keep that up. Here's another one where his jaw caught. This is a flock of them. They just arrived from migration, and they're just getting together for the hell of it. This is them. I photographed them against the Rockaways. This is the bird who claims that they are the smallest sandpiper, not the least sandpiper. This is something called the semi-palmated sandpiper, and they too are just about 6 inches long. The name semi-palm comes from the fact that their legs are semi-webbed, not completely webbed. Just so some sick bastard gave them that name. And this is something called the semi-palmated plover, and it's not related. It's a shorebird, but it's not a sandpiper. It's a member of the plover family. Here's the piping plover. Now there's only 200 pairs of them left, which is up from 50. So they're making a comeback. Well, they're a really adorable bird. You come there in the morning, and it's like it's very strange phenomenon. The Belt Parkway is right there, and there's a little bike path that you can walk, and you come to a path that goes into the forest, and you walk into it, and the highway disappears, and all of a sudden you're in another world. There's 100 feet of forest between you and the highway. The more you walk into the marsh, the greater the distance to the highway, since the highway curves away. But it's almost a psychedelic thing, that you know, like you're in one world, the world of busy, the rush hour traffic and the whole 9 yards, and then the next minute there's the sound of gulls and songbirds, and there are plenty of songbirds. I mean, Baltimore Orioles are songbirds, and of course, there's more than one kind of warbler.